identify with, I've read, I know, I hear, I understand. But there is this, the United States, Americans, have this here, us, U.S., okay, there, not us, therefore not, okay. Now, into that pours in all these other things that you have had in this conversation. It's an ignorance that, how can somebody not be aware that there's an African-American community substantial within their own, and it's because they drive like, or whatever it is, because we have this ignorant belief that we just hang on to. Forget what the statistics say, forget that there's so that boils into the puzzle. So how does that, in other words, you've got an audience here that wants to hear this. There's a whole bunch of people that are just blind and oblivious and think that everybody who's Muslim came from Arabia. And therefore they're terrorists when the majority of Muslims live in Asian countries. But they just, you see what I'm saying?
I think that, like, sorry.
And I didn't mean to throw it at you that way.
No. I think one way that we can combat that, because I think you're absolutely right. A large majority of people in this country have this belief that, like, American history started after the genocide of Native Americans. We came here and this is our country and it's just not true, and then kind of like turning a blind eye at this huge subset and the contributions of many people of color. And I think one way to combat these unfair and accurate stereotypes of labeling all groups as being this way or one religion as being this way, is all black people not being economically contributive or being this way, is to have these dialogues and to get these communities engaged and involved in their communities. I mean, that's hard because some of these communities are also maybe disproportionately represented in terms of being, they might be impoverished, they may not have a lot of access, but getting them to vote, getting them to be, involved, be members in different sort of communities, sort of engagement sort of ways, so that like they can share their stories, so that people can realize that, oh, you're a Muslim who's liberal, who holds a job, who's from China, or, you know what I mean? And then it kind of starts to, it challenges those notions. I think forums like this are good, where people can hear stories of people with all different types of identities. I think it's really about sharing, meeting people. I think that really starts to kind of challenge people's perceptions about massive groups of people that can never really hold true.
And that's where I was looking at that us, them, because in the United States, we want to just think it's, I mean, not we, but white privilege says, we don't see and we don't want to mix and we aren't, and I'm not comfortable, and because you mentioned earlier, how do I address, am I Hispanic, am I, okay, the same thing is true, but everybody's, so they put themselves up in this whole blind set of I can'ts.
Right.
And they end up I don't.
And this is why the civic engagement work that we're talking about is so critical. So recently we were in a structural racism workshop, and they asked the question, how do white allies assist? Oftentimes we're in panels and the people of color are having conversations about race, and I think that one of the things that I loved about it was it really asked the white people in the room, a lot of really serious questions that enlightened me too. For example, there was this sort of conversation where the person was saying, how do you stick up for somebody? I don't want to squish their voice, but I want to be an ally. And like having those conversations and knowing, for example, that women, people of color, and minorities, immigrants, it takes them 3, 4, 10 times for you to ask them to run for office or anything, come to the library and sit on the board, before they'll do it. But the minute that they're visible to the community, not only to their own community, but to everybody else, you're like, well, wait a minute, I didn't know this person. I mean, I've had people say, I don't know an undocumented person, and I always say, you probably do, and you just don't know it.
Or you don't want to.
You probably do, and but so I think that as people of color, who have access to resources or white allies, we need to be really active, in the places that we work, engaging and bringing them along. And not just challenging other white people, or I challenge my family a lot too, but but really thinking about how do we engage people and bring them onto boards and bring them and provide access and, you know, get them training, you know. I mean, like, I won't run. I've been asked and I'm still scared. If I'm scared, and I have access, and I've kicked some butt in some places, and I still am afraid, can you just imagine? So, you know, and I think, you know, and that's what Christine just mentioned, you know, that's really important work that everybody's doing.
That swings into a very real, I'm from Farmington. Farmington's, yes, it's a multi-ethnic community, very. All over, you know, 83, just like Troy. We talked about that earlier. But the school system is in this big flush in what's happening. I mean, the white majority doesn't want to say this, but that's what is happening is it's changing. The nature of the community, they're going to school and they're looking at a school and it's not like me anymore. And now it's easier for me to go someplace else where it is like me. And what happens is exactly what you're saying is this political voice, this involvement voice, isn't there. So now certain people can, well, power and prestige and privilege, get to make choices that are maybe contrary to the needs of the community, and now you've got this inevitable clash that's going to occur. I don't know what the issue will be. I don't know, but it is coming.
I wanted to just highlight, because we do work with a lot of white leaders, especially in Macomb County, and kind of taking them on that journey. So, you know, when you speak to folks, there's some people who are on the far end of the right of the spectrum, far left. And we're trying to meet people who are in the middle, and, you know, it might take a few conversations or getting to know someone who's been affected by the issues, but then their thinking does evolve. And we're trying to kind of meet them where they're at and then bring them along, like Raquel said. And so some of that starts with privilege and oppression and race training. And so we've had some of the Macomb County leaders go through that. Other local governments are looking at it. It sometimes is a conversation. So for the one elected official that I mentioned before, the person was a Democrat and had just banked on the African-American vote for so many years that she hadn't really stopped to think through, you know, who actually was in that community and, you know, taking the time to meet them and hearing their stories. And then I wanted to highlight a positive example coming out of Clinton Township. The supervisor there has, so this north-south divide, and maybe in Farmington it might look a little different, but in Macomb County especially we see it as north-south. So, you know, the closer you are to Wayne County, people are very sensitive to domestic migrants, people moving from Detroit and Wayne County into Macomb County. And so the Clinton Township supervisor made a deliberate effort to actually direct investment to the southern border of the township, because that's where the majority of the African American community lives. And the northern border, which is Hall Road, I mean, we talked about it and he said, you know, really that area can take care of itself. You know, you have kind of a luxury mall that's developed. That development is attracting itself. And so he's focusing his efforts and energy in the southern portion of the township. And so there's a lot of ways that connects to the immigrant populations that live in the township too. There's a Hmong community that was utilizing the same, they invested in sidewalks, okay, which is a big deal. And you know, there was some Hmong community members that were utilizing the sidewalks that the African American community members were utilizing. And so we started to see some community building out of that. So there is change and sort of minds opening in certain ways. You know, as you all know, social change is a lot of work. It's slow going. So you know, we're quite pleased with some of the smaller advancements, and then we hope some of these bigger policies things will have a larger impact, like for example the language access. But
and I think, like, if you're a member of, like, your neighborhood association or community group, and you know someone who's like an Asian family or something that kind of isn't involved, like, get them involved. You know, try to bring other people. I mean, how great would it be if there was, like, business owners there was some sort of group that represented business owners who were black, who were Asian, who were white. I think that would be kind of the responsibilities that I would feel, or that is the responsibility that I feel as someone of privilege, who's an immigrant, who knows about these issues and what's going on. And I would feel that, you know, like white allies too, black allies too, if you know these people, if you know about these immigrants who are kind of just below the radar right now because they're too scared to get involved, help to get them involved. Because it helps the community, and also helps to dispel these notions of discrimination, these discriminatory notions that exist.
On the note of the chambers, sorry, just briefly, there's mainstream chambers of commerce that, I say mainstream, most of their membership is white, and so we've been meeting with them and having different events and activities so they could get to know the ethnic chambers of commerce, and then also meet some of the immigrant entrepreneurs who aren't affiliated with any chamber because they didn't really see themselves fitting in at any of the established ethnic chambers or the mainstream chambers. So that's another process that's happening.
Although, Christine, I would